Welcome back to another episode of the Mainly Hoops podcast. Now moving into the Big Ten, our first Big Ten team preview. Going to start with the Michigan Wolverines. Before we do dive in, if you have been enjoying our content so far throughout the offseason, please go ahead and like and subscribe. We do appreciate everyone's support. But diving in here, Michigan Wolverines, second season under Dusty May. Obviously lost a lot, saw Danny Wolf go to the draft. Most notably lost Vlad Golden, so their front court had to be replaced, and they went out and got very active in the portal and reloaded after a nice season last year. So looking at the offensive side of the ball first here, Cody, what are your thoughts here on their offensive strengths?
Yeah, I mean, these guys, they lost some pieces, but they probably reloaded with some better pieces, like particularly in the front court with Axel Lendeborg, Merez Johnson, and one of my guys, Adai Mara. I don't know if he starts or if Merez Johnson ends up starting. I think the better pairing might be Johnson, but I think the talent of Adai Mara and the upside of Mara, I think he might end up being more of like a long-term guy here. Like if he comes back next year, like this is going to be his front court. But ultimately, it's probably going to belong to Lendeborg for the most part from a creation standpoint. But the strengths of this team are it's in the front court, it's with their rim dominance and their offensive rebounding, and it's going to be with those three guys. They're just going to be ridiculously tough to stop when they get to the rim. This group as a whole has a ton of skill, and they're going to be played through pretty much entirely when the ball is not in Cano's hands. Lendeborg's going to be asked to do a lot as a scorer and a creator, and he's going to be a real mismatch problem at the four after playing quite a bit of time at the five with UAB. But either way, I think his skill set is as well set up to play the four or the five. And like I mentioned, Mara has a ton of skill, and making them a potentially like dangerous pick and roll duo. Like it's kind of going to be another edition of the big to big pick and roll. But I think this honestly is a better version. It's a less volatile version than you got with Wolf and Golden. Wolf would throw the ball away quite often, and Golden wasn't as skilled as Mara is. So I do think this duo is going to work out a little bit better, and it's going to be a little bit tougher to stop. And this team's also going to be ridiculous on the offensive glass, probably one of the top 10 best teams in the country when it comes to offensive rebound rate. Mara was 17% last year. Merez Johnson was 17.3%, and Lendeborg at the four was 11.6%, which that number could improve when being guarded by smaller players. So I'm pretty interested to see how it's going to look with the backcourt at the very least. But I think Lendeborg's inside out skill set is going to mask a lot of these things.
Yeah, I obviously the front court, how they reloaded it should be really fun to watch. I think there's some real strength in playmaking out of this team too. Like Lendeborg is going to be a huge part of that. Mara is going to be a big part of that. He's a great passer for a big, and also like for all of Elliot Cadeau's faults, him coming in from North Carolina, like he is a good passer. 38% assist rate. He can make plays with the ball. So I think that they're definitely going to have some playmaking at their disposal. However, shifting gears to weaknesses now, the main weakness that stands out to me is their shooting. I think they have players that can make plays, but they're going to be kicking to guys that can't necessarily shoot it, with the exception of Namari Burnett, who he can obviously really shoot it. He can get going. 165 attempts last year, 40% from three. But then you have guys like Roddy Gale, who 23% last year. Trey McKinney seems like he's okay as a shooter potentially. Obviously like Merez Johnson, not a shooter. Lendeborg, low volume, showed the ability to knock it down a little bit at 36%, but didn't even hit 70 attempts last year. And then Will Cheddar, who has been a solid shooter throughout his career. But, for me, it's like the guard shooting is a real problem. There's not a ton of guard wing shooting outside of Burnett because I don't really think Winters Grady is going to play all that much. LJ Kaysen, not a great shooter. And as I mentioned, Roddy Gale is a low volume, really poor 3-point shooter. So I do worry a bit about their spacing at times in the half court, especially if they're going to play. They're going to play two bigs most of the time. Obviously, Lendeborg has the ability to stretch outside and go off the bounce, but I think it's going to be a real disservice to this team that they don't have the ability to have more than just one guy or a couple guys that can consistently knock down perimeter jump shots. We saw Cadeau last year, right? He's had a really unique shooting career, it seems like, because he was not guarded at all his freshman year, and then he had that tournament game where he made 4, and then by the end of the game, they were just playing averages, and by the end of that game, he couldn't even play him because he couldn't even hit the rim anymore. And then last year took a big jump to 33.7%. Still low volume, though. He doesn't want to shoot it. He's looking to go off the bounce and make plays first. So this team's just littered with low efficiency 3-point shooters who don't take a lot of volume. So I think that's really my main concern for this team.
Yeah, I would agree. It looks like a pretty glaring concern. I think Dusty May is just kind of trying to completely tap into the rim dominance here. They're going to work through the post, and it's going to give them a high floor. Their 2-point field goal percentage is probably going to be very good, although it could be a tad worse than last year, just because they probably spaced the floor worse than they did a year ago, and they didn't really shoot it that well last year either. I think it's a team that's probably going to turn it over quite a bit again. Working through the front court, just naturally, I think they're going to run into some more issues there, and the lack of spacing is going to, muck things up in a half court setting a bit. No, this is where Cadeau becomes a weird fit, because you mentioned he improved as a shooter, but he doesn't really shoot it all that well, low volume, but and he needs the ball in his hands to provide value. And and I don't really see him playing on the ball as high of a usage as he did in North Carolina. The ball is going to be in the hands of Lendeborg and Mara very often here. He had a 26% turnover rate last season, and I think it's more of a deadly pick and roll combo with him and Lendeborg or Mara, but ultimately, if he's going to be throwing the ball away, I do think it's going to be an issue again. They finished in the 300s in turnover rate last year. I see them getting a little bit better there, just because I think Lendeborg is a little more sound with the ball than Danny Wolf was, but I don't see a major upgrade in that area. And yeah, I think it's just suspect guard play across the board. There's a lot of guards that can't really play off the ball at that high of a level. Cadeau being one of them, Gale obviously one of them, just because he doesn't shoot it well. He can attack the rim, get to the line a little bit, but you can only do so much if you're a non-spacing 2 guard. And McKinney is more of a mid-range. I think that's kind of where he can shoot the 3. He can probably get to 33-34% on decent volume this season, but ultimately I think he's kind of capped into the mid-range for decent efficiency. Will Cheddar is a guy, but ultimately I'm definitely worried about the perimeter offense and ball security, which was similar to last season.
Yeah, no, it's fair. And then in the turnovers, as we saw several times last year, what cost them a bunch of games. So shifting gears now to the defensive side of the ball, obviously, the front court being a strength on the offensive end, it's probably going to be their main strength on the defensive end as well. You've got Adai Mara at 7'3", 17.2% block rate last year. You've got Lendeborg, who had a 5.1% block rate, also, creates plays, stealing the ball, 3% steal rate as well. Morez Johnson, beast on the defensive glass, 5.5% block rate himself. So I would say the strength of this defense has to be in the front court as well. They do have like some in Burnett and Gale, some decent wing defenders. But I think the strength is definitely in that front court.
Yeah, absolutely. It's gonna be rim dominance and rebounding really on both ends of the floor. And it's gonna give this team a super high floor on both sides. It's just a matter of where the ceiling lies. And I think the perimeter group it's really no slouch. And like you mentioned, like Amari Burnett, Roddy Gale are really good on ball defenders. They're switchable 1 through 3. Then you bring in some other guys off the bench and in Trey McKinney and LJ Kaysen who really fit the mold on this side. They're very well built. McKinney has a decent wingspan to go with him as well. And I do think these guys are pretty interchangeable on the defensive side. Cadeau is a playmaker at the very least. I wouldn't call him a great on-ball defender. Ultimately, we call him the weak link within this defense. But, if you only have one like semi below average defender, I don't think it's all that bad of a thing. And I think this team's going to be really good in 2 areas. Like their first shot defense is going to be really good, and they're going to clean the defensive glass with the group they have. Part of it is the scheme. Part of it is the deep drop coverage that May deploys and runs teams off the 3-point line, limits catch and shoot opportunities. Like he's very analytically driven coach, and it's just gonna lead to a super high floor, and they have the personnel.
Yeah, no, it's for sure. While the front court will be a strength, I do have a bit of a concern in the front court, not necessarily from like what they're capable of, but Morez Johnson oftentimes found himself in foul trouble. 5.7 fouls per 40 last year, and then you've got a guy like a Daimara, who has never played more than 13.1 minutes in a game, right? And Morez Johnson dealt with some injuries last year. He was only playing 17 minutes a game. So, you've got you're going to rotate 2 bigs through there that combine to play 30 minutes a game. And, looking at, like I said, Morez Johnson, 5.7 fouls per 40 minutes. Mara, more disciplined, 4.2. He tends to just kind of play more straight up and uses 7'3" length, but he's never played a huge amount of minutes, right? In his first 2 years, it's been 9 and 13. So I have a little bit of a concern just with, if Morez Johnson isn't more disciplined and able to stay on the floor longer, how does Mara respond? Can he play a higher number of minutes? Was he not playing more minutes just strictly because of Mick Cronin, and that's just what he kind of slotted him at? Or, can he make that leap and play closer to half a game, right? So that's more so just a concern for me. Obviously, from a style perspective, I think they're both, going to be really good for this defense when they're out there. But just a minor concern.
Yeah. Ultimately, I think they're going to be okay in the front court from, I think I'm willing to bet that the talents there are going to be just fine. And like more minutes is I think they're going to be able to work with that perfectly fine. I just think, and also they have 3 options that can play the center. Like Lendeborg has played the center position his entire career, and he's a competent rim protector, and you can slide in a physical presence like Will Cheddar at the 4, and then you still have physicality on the wing to match to kind of just match that mold there. And I think they're still going to be able to get on the defensive glass fine with Lendeborg at the 5. I actually had some foul trouble concerns with the guard play, honestly. Like you have Namari Burnett 4 fouls per game or per 40, Cadeau 4 fouls per 40, and like a guy like LJ Kaysen off the bench had 5 fouls per 40. Like you don't really see that very often with guards. I mean, they just try to impose their will and be super physical. That it led to a little bit too much foul trouble. And the fact that we don't necessarily love the guard depth, like if a guy like Namari Burnett gets into foul trouble, there's really no shooting on the wings or from the guard position. So I think he's going to be a really important player for this team, and he's going to need to stay on the floor. He played 26 minutes a game last year. Ultimately, I don't think he runs into major issues every night, but I do think that's a slight concern if he gets hurt, goes down for a game, there's really no spacing there. Just one other minor concern would be, I mean, it's scheme driven, but they don't really force turnovers at a high level. And, if you're playing a guy like a Daimara in a deep drop coverage consistently, like you're not really going to optimize any turnover forcing. They were 273rd last season even with the solid perimeter playmakers that they have. So it's just not an emphasis and ultimately not a concern because they're going to be good in other areas.
Yeah, no, that's fair, especially like you said, when Mara is on the court, he's not going to be up, on ball screens, high hedging and making plays. He's going to be in drop, protecting the rim with his 7'3" length. Now, turning to individual superlatives, team MVP, I assume I know where you're going here with Lendeborg, but I'll let you speak to that and team X factor.
Yeah, it's Lendeborg for me. I think he's a better version of Danny Wolf, a more poised version of Danny Wolf, and he does more things in the secondary action categories. Like he can get all over the glass. Like Wolf wasn't a fantastic offensive rebounder, but like Lendeborg throughout his entire career, when he was playing with guys like, I believe he was with Jelly Walker his last year there, and he just got all over the glass. He could play more in secondary actions, and he's going to be able to do that here when the ball is not in his hands. But as for my X factor, I went with Elliot Cadeau. I do think he's going to have to shoot it better, and he's going to have to make high-level decisions with the ball in his hands. Like, not everything can go through this front court, and I don't really think there's another fantastic primary creator outside of Cadeau, and we always know he's always had upside. He just needs to prove it with his shooting ability, and he just needs to take care of the ball a little bit better. But he's one of the most talented passers in the country. He just needed a better system, and I wish there was more spacing around him because that would be the more ideal setup for him, is just him playing around 3 or 4 floor spacers, and he can just dish there. But the floor is going to be a little more mucked up, but he's just going to have to step up.
Yeah. I wish I could say I went a different direction, but I went with the same, for pretty much the same reasons. Lendeborg's going to be their best player. He's going to create so many plays and do so many great things on both ends. Cadeau, for those reasons, right? Can he shoot the ball a little bit better? He's their on-ball creator, other than Lendeborg, and Mara will do some as well. But at the guard spot, they're primary creators. So how can he be more effective there? Like you said, taking care of the basketball. They're going to need him to be if they want to, reach what, a lot of models and projections expect them to be. So yeah, I went Cadeau there as well, which leads me now into ceiling and floor. Where do you see this team finishing? Obviously, you look at Torvik. Torvik projects them as the 3rd best team in the country and the top team in the Big Ten. Now, based on our conversations, I know you view a different team as the top of the Big Ten, as do I. But where do you see this team falling?
Yeah, I can't quite get there with them being the 3rd best team in the country. I just think they have a major flaw on the offensive end. It's with the shooting. You can only bully so many teams at the rim before you run into like an elite rim protecting defense, an elite defensive rebounding team, and before you run into some real trouble. And which is why, like, I don't love their ceiling. I mean, I still think it's in the realm of possibility for them to win a Big Ten championship in the regular season and be like a 2 or 3 seed. I mean, if you're a Big Ten champ, you're probably going to be the 2 seed at least. And I think they can make an Elite 8. I just don't see this team getting to the Final Four with the major flaw that they have. And it doesn't seem like it's all that fixable. I mean, you have guys down the board in like potentially like a Winters Grady. I just don't know what his role is going to look like. And I just don't really see them, taking guys out of the rotation like Roddy Gale or Trey McKinney, LJ Kaysen. Like, I think those guys are ahead of him in the pecking order. So I just think that flaw is going to limit their championship ceiling, but I think their floor is super high. I mean, I think their floor is probably like 6th in this league, and they could be like a 7 or an 8 seed. I'd see them, playing as the home team in their first game of the tournament in at their floor. So I do think they're going to be good all year. They're going to be a tough team to beat all year, but they have a real flaw.
Yeah, I said they could win the Big Ten. I think we both have the same thought as to who we expect to win the Big Ten or who we're picking to win the Big Ten. But as we know with this league, there's so many teams and so many things can happen. And this Michigan team certainly no slouch. They, like you said, they just have some flaws that could shine through a little bit too much. So I said they could win the Big Ten, realistically with their rim dominance. And then floor, I had them at fifth. Just kind of looking at the rest of the teams in this league. Like I feel like they're pretty, like you said, they have a higher floor. They're pretty comfortable. They're going to comfortably make the tournament, I think, without a problem. So that's where I stand on that. Before we wrap things up here, do you have a bold prediction for the Wolverines?
Yeah, I don't really have anything crazy bold. I just went with an Elliot Cadeau stat. I think he can make 45 threes this year. I think he's going to have to take a super high volume of them to get to this number, but I think it's going to be needed because you don't have I don't trust Roddy Gale to make a shot to save his life. He hasn't done it within the last 2 years, except for that one game in the tournament when he turned into Michael Jordan. But I don't think I don't really see that coming from him. So I do think Cadeau is going to have to be a guy that can play off the ball a bit more. He's going to play at least. He probably averages 30 minutes a game just because they kind of need his creation out on the perimeter. So yeah, I think it's possible.
Yeah, I went with a Cadeau 3-point stat as well. I said Elliot Cadeau shoots a career high 3-point percentage at 35% plus on greater than 100 attempts.
Yeah, see, I couldn't get there on the volume because or on the percentage. I think he can get there on volume because he has to do it.
Yeah. So we'll see what Cadeau has in store. I think hopefully maybe a change of scenery is just what he needed. But we'll wrap things up here with the Michigan Wolverines. We'll see what they have for us here in now less than a month, and we'll see you next time on the Mainly Hoops podcast.